Victoria is a complicated gal, but to be fair, in Victoria 3, she's in charge of a very complex world. Consider subscribing and joining us. We are nearly at 40,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. Here are some new tips. Zoom in here on my, what granted looks like actually, a relatively desolate state of Texas. I noticed something. The state is in turmoil. One thing that we haven't really talked much about on my channel at all is the impacts of standard of living. And if you have a look at the standard of living map here, you can see that a lot of my people are struggling, particularly those in the middle strata. And this will cause turmoil, loads of turmoil. One of the many things, of course, that can impact the standard of living of a people. Now, the best way to read it, if you don't already know, is to hover over the standard of living icon up the top here. You can see that relative to my peers, the standard of living in Texas is not very good. You also can see the different standard of living requirements across the three stratas of society, those at the bottom, the middle, and the top. In this case, my lower strata have their needs at least satisfied enough. They expect it to be at 6.2, they're at 7.1. Great. Our upper strata are doing really well. They are prosperous, and they expect something much less. However, you can see that my middle strata is struggling. If you hover over this, you can see a little bit more detail as to why. So the middle strata in Texas at the moment are paying an average of 16.2% of their income in taxes, which is reducing the amount of money they have to fend for their needs. The other impact on the other side of this is that they're paying an average of 52% more for the goods that they need to buy to fulfill their needs, because of course these are real people inside of this simulation. So they need grain and wheat and clothes and all of these things. So here we get an understanding as to how their standard of need, or living, I should say, is calculated. It's calculated across their needs and how much money they have to purchase them. It's that simple. So what we can do is then try and feed more money into their back pockets, or try and provide more goods in the market, among a variety of other tools or mechanisms that we could use to try and get people the things that they need so that they can live good lives. Of course, you could navigate to the budget screen, for example, and simply look to lower your taxes. You'll see this will do two things. It will decrease radicals from standard of living decreases over time, but also it will reduce taxes, and that will put more money into people's back pockets. In this case, I might look to slash my taxes all the way down to very low, because actually we're doing all right. We're a pretty small state. We don't have a lot of needs. If I brought government wages down a little bit, maybe introduced one consumption tax on liquor, I can fill up the budget deficit, and we're doing just fine. Here, I will instantly be able to provide a standard of living increase to my people by putting more money into their back pockets. This will, of course, help to reduce radicalism. Here you can see radicals in my territory and, crucially, how and why it's changing. And what you'll notice is that, by and large, the changes are overwhelmingly caused by standard of living. At least in this case. Take a look. At the very top of that list, 8,900 from decreases in their standard of living, and then a further 2,400 radicals from having a standard of living below expected minimums. This is way higher than anything generated from discrimination, enslavement, from being fired from buildings even. This is massive. And you can see also the swing from changing those wages. Look at that. Increases in standard of living, having a massive shift on the number of overall radicals being created in Texas, and this will ultimately provide a more stable Texan economy and political environment for me to manage. If managing that turmoil happily isn't always easy, and maybe you don't quite have time to lift up a standard of living or inadvertently decrease another, you could also look to right-click and enact, say, violent suppression. This will decrease state penalties from turmoil, as will a variety of other things. That's not the focus of this video, but you could also look, of course, to institutions like law enforcement as well. Upping that will increase political strength, but decrease penalties from turmoil. A top tip, if you weren't already using them, by the way, and you're looking to increase the needs of your people and their general happiness, you might be wanting to remove consumption taxes. These mess with market prices, get in the way of people's needs, all sorts of things. A useful tool in generating income, particularly in larger states, don't get me wrong. But in this case, $55 for 200 authority is a really bad deal for me. It's just not worth it. Instead, I could look to issue some decrees. These are massively powerful. I've covered them a little bit already on the channel, but a couple of note. Road maintenance is very powerful. It only costs 100 authority, so it's less than a lot of those consumption taxes. And with it, we get an increase to infrastructure, allowing us to build more and move more goods around effectively, and a plus 10% increase in state construction efficiency. This is huge, and if you're building in an area, you probably just want to have this active all the time. As I just mentioned, the violent suppression can be useful if things aren't quite going your way. You could also look to specialize, though. Specialize a certain industry and its output. Here, I might look to agriculture and ranches and say, you know what? I'm going to spend another 100 authority to improve our output instead of just taxing another good. And with another at least 100 authority to play with, I could also look to enlist efforts and get some extra troops on board. Or maybe I just want to steal a whole load of populations and migrate them here with a greener grass campaign. Or, of course, provide more education to the people. Another great thing you can do to lift their standard of living, quality of life, and use your authority for good instead of just extra taxes. When all else fails, though, you have to go back to basics. And so my last tip is going to be about fixing some of these really fundamentally basic needs. Here, if we hover over a pop group need, you'll notice it's reflected in things like grain, meat, services, clothes, and furniture. Those fundamental things that you probably need to live. If you reflect over to the market tab and filter by either buy and sell orders or market price, you'll see that reflected. Look at the huge price for furniture in Texas. It's massive. As we move down the list, look at something like grain. Here it's really evident in the buy orders. We have 20 buy orders for grain, and we are currently fulfilling 3 of those. We have 3 sell orders. This is causing a huge increase in the price of grain and ultimately lowering everybody's quality of life. To address this, of course, we could look to build more farms to actually create more grain within our economy. However, the need at the moment is so dire that really we're going to have to look to other options. We're going to look to a new import route, of course, where we'll use our port and our existing convoys and bureaucracy, convoys generated from our port and our bureaucracy, of course, up here, to start importing some grain. Like there's no tomorrow. We might even need multiple trade routes, but as this one starts to get established, it may also level up as we start to import more grain, and you'll see an immediate impact. Here, we'll monitor it. Okay, it had an effect, and now that effect is rapidly dwindling. Let's get some French grain in here as well. We'll navigate over to our buildings tab. What are we building at the moment? It's not providing grain. Let me alt-click and bring a wheat farm to the top of the list. We could also probably look to add more, but because I'm a small nation, my construction's very low, and I can't really afford to support any more. So I'll need to slowly build away at that. Of course, enacting extra trade routes will cost you bureaucracy, and if you're a small or struggling state, that will hurt you as well. So do take care to balance things out, and to balance out the different needs of your population by fulfilling them domestically and also hopefully catering for them abroad. What you should note over time is that standard of living will increase. Take a look at that. Just in this small amount of time that I've been talking, we've lifted up the standard of living by literally just focusing on grain. One good was all we looked at to fix its supply chain, and it's made a massive impact on the standard of living of our people. Have we lowered radicalism yet? No, we've still got some more work to do, but at least the people have grain on the table, and now we can move through and look at our next good, the next requirement, the next thing that people really need, once we're satisfied that the grain one is met, of course, and move through to fulfill that. Maybe now we might look to put clothes on people's backs. Again, not an unreasonable request, and something that any good nation might probably look to do. That is how you fulfill the needs of your people and fix the economy at the same time. You can see that all the systems inside of Victoria 3, this wonderful grand strategy simulation, are interrelated, and I'd encourage you to play around with these. Try and fulfill the needs of your people. Provide to them. Put more money in their back pockets. and use all the tips in these videos that were hopefully, at least in some part, new to you to become a better Victoria 3 player. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.